Got the mini lathe 7 by 10 inches. Okay, on the tool holder over here, the tool bit can be placed on the left side here, or it can be placed on the right side. Some of my videos I've purposely put it on the right side here so it's more centered on the, it's number 93212, and I've got this side racked over in here so the tool's right above this. When that's like this, there's not that much of the ways here engaged, so it's got a lot of slop. So if I put this all the way over, hang on a second, so all the waves this whole length here is connected up. It's much more stable. Now the tool on this side is now not necessarily centered on this. When you're doing a cut, I prefer to put the tool bit on this other side so that the force is, especially if I'm going in or I'm taking light precision cuts, that it's more centered on this ways on here. If I back this all the way out, then so it's more centered, then you get more slop up and down here. So I prefer to have this entire groove all that engaged, and then I tend sometimes to put the tool on this side so that it's centered up on here, and then it's a much stiffer assembly. So there's the tool over on here, and then many times I'll put the tool bit on this other side like this so that it's a stiffer assembly when I'm cutting, and then I get a better cut. And so there's more rigidity. So that's the reason why a couple videos I've put the tool on this side. Another reason is sometimes so I can get a larger travel over here. I can have this bit over here and gain a little bit of extra range in cutting. Another reason is that sometimes I prefer to have the tool more centered on this piece so it's not cantilevered over like this. And the tool bit itself is actually supported on all three of these screws are bearing down on here. And if you put it on this other side, you can bear all three of these other cap screws on there. So that isn't really an issue on there. You can see that it's got the cap screws bearing down. This is the gizmo to tighten it up. But anyways, okay, I put a small socket in here, and I turn the wheel so I can pop off the live center. Turn all this around. Now in here, if I want to go through and try to get this tool more centered on this sideways, I can move this all the way over. A little bit like that. Then there's less engagement on this dovetail on here, and so it's got more slop. So I prefer on a precision cut to go through and move this and keep this pretty much all engaged, and then the tool is over on this side. And many times I put the tool bit on this other side, the right side, especially if I'm cutting off this way facing an edge, or I'm going through and taking a light cut, because I prefer to have this more centered on here. If I'm taking a real heavy cut, you might argue that the force is for the pushing on the side here too, and so maybe it is better to have it on this side. But I was just doing this video to show the pros and cons of putting this on one side versus another. And this does have slop, and when you tighten this down, it's going to have some give to it. So the idea is to try to have as much as these things, if I move the tool holder over here to have it choked up a good bit, that's good. If it's hanging out here in the breeze, it's going to tend to deflect and move around. That isn't necessarily as good. So I try to have this choked up to where it's got engaged sticking out the minimum that it's really required. And it's got 3 screws that bear down on this, and so this is all held on the bottom of this plate, whether it's on the left side here or the right, it's clamped exactly the same way on there. Another thing, if you've got some crap that gets underneath there, some shavings or something, it can be to where you're clamping this down here and you think that it's actually metal to metal all around. It can actually be just bearing down on some crap here, and what will happen is it can have a little bit of give that way too. So it needs to be metal to metal all the way around when you tighten this down. You can go through and clamp this like this at an angle if you want to. Let's say your bit isn't really cut the way you want to for the cut. You can go through and purposely turn the tool holder around like that. But again, this is just showing that if I wanted to have the tool more centered on this for certain cuts, I don't necessarily like going through and backing this other slide way out like this. If it's out too much, got a lot of slop here, so I prefer the ways to be all the way engaged here. And there's the tool on the left side. You can put the tool on the right side, and when you do that, it's more centered on this set of ways, so the force is going down into this area. Now, when you're cutting this way, like cutting threads or cutting metal, you do have a vector in the force pushing this way, so you might argue it needs to be biased probably a little bit toward the center, off to the edge this way, so that you've got a vector going, backing this stuff going this way, and you have the one going down. So probably the preferred location depends on what the cutting force is. It needs to be probably toward the center if you're just cutting a groove down in here, or if you're actually moving the slide here cutting, you need to go through and have it probably bias a little bit to the left of center here. It's just that I don't necessarily like this sometimes hanging way off to the left, so I tend to put it here on the right side in some of my